Most game developers I know, before they even ever start working on their game, they already shoot themselves in the foot and make their life a lot harder. Why? Because they go into it solo. They're solo game developers. Most of the indie developers there are solo. And of course you have the success stories, you have the Stardew Valleys and things like that, who after like 5 or 6 years of development, making every single part of the game by themselves, having a very cohesive vision, deliver a banger of a game. But these are more of an exception. And whilst of course I can always say that, you know, it's better to go into it with multiple people, this is not always as easy. I understand that, and a lot of you guys have told me that before as well. So that's not like the point of this video. The point of this video is more to warn you about what to watch out for, what can go wrong, what are the most common problems you get to deal with as a game developer who does it solo. This doesn't mean that the problems I'm going to talk about in this video don't apply to people who work in teams, but generally these are things that as a solo developer you will have the most impact of. Now, if you know what to look out for, of course, you can better prepare. So that's also, a bit of the point of this video is just to warn you as well. So what are the things you should watch out for when you're a solo developer? And the first problem I have is that usually you're stretched out too thin. Even if you go full-time as a game developer, which a lot of solo developers just do it as a hobby, even then it's often you have to do everything at the same time. You have to do the art, you have to do the music, you have to do the modeling, you have to do the programming, and you have to do the marketing and like all of the business management stuff as well. That's a lot of stuff to do. And this leads to often ridiculously long development cycles, if you ask me. For example, as I said, Stardew Valley was 5 years, but there's a few other Belgian game developers that I've talked to. And whether they work on it full-time or on the side, they have like 7 years to develop one game. And of course, that doesn't mean that the games are bad, but if you look at it, the amount of work they did in 7 years, and I think the problem is, well, that means you can release 4 games in your lifetime if you take 7 years for every development, assuming you start at 20 and you don't develop until you're old and retired in the retirement home. There's not a lot of time to make games, or you won't have enough time to make all of your ideas, because generally as game developers you're filled with all of these ideas. But if you're just gonna take that long for one idea, you'll often get bored of that idea. 7 years is a lot of time to just be disciplined and motivated to work on your game, don't forget that. And you just want to work on new stuff. You want to at some point finish your game and finally get started on something new, instead of starting the game up with the same Unity project for 7 years. That gets very boring. And there's not that much you can do here. You can only shrink your scope, but even some of the games that do take 5-7 years to develop, they already have a somewhat small scope. Also, you have to learn everything from scratch and you have no specialization, or maybe even if you are specialized in something, usually you can't let that shine. For example, that's what we have with Forge Industry. We were in a team even, but we were all programmers really, and we knew nothing else. So of course our code, we could dive into that one, but things like our art, we just had to learn. And you can't learn an entire new concept such as low poly 3D modeling and have a good consistent style whilst also making the rest of the game in a shorter period of time. Granted, we still took 18 months to develop our game, which isn't nothing, but it's still a whole lot less than 7 entire years. Next up is getting tunnel vision as the only creative person on the project, because you have this idea and you know this idea. You know it inside out, you programmed it, you know how it exactly works under the hood. It's really hard to get that tested because generally you also don't have as many people who can test it with. And yeah, of course you can have some testing rounds, but even then they're usually later in development. Whereas certain mechanics may seem painfully obvious to you, but you don't have anyone at the ready in your team that you can send the build to and who can immediately sanity check and be yo, what the hell is this? I have no clue what I'm supposed to do. Nothing makes sense. We had this a bit with, for example, our pod finding. In our game, we added congestion systems, but we don't really fully explain that we have those congestions. So we got a lot of bug reports that people were oh, workers don't behave correctly. They walk all random directions. And then we have to go oh, I guess it isn't clear that certain roads have different capacities, because we were all just drilled down so deeply into, oh yeah, we're gonna have congestion and pod finding that automatically reroutes once there is congestion, that we didn't really realize that it wasn't always that clear. And we were with 4 people who looked at it. If you're just by yourself, it's going to be massively amplified in how certain things look painfully obvious to you, but nobody else has a clue how they work. And this is something that can really detriment how fun your game is, how playable your game is, and how many people in the end are just going to buy your game. And then a bit linked to this tunnel vision is the lack of creative collaboration. You can't bounce ideas back and forth with anyone really. You have an idea and you can like discuss it with yourself, I guess, internally, like brainstorm about how you would implement it. But it's much slower to brainstorm and like find out what does and doesn't work if you can't just like very rapidly bounce ideas with each other. Like, you need multiple people with various different perspectives, various different outlooks on like how they play games to really have a good idea of how should I make my game. For example, for Forge Industry, it actually helped us a bit that we had people in our team who never played games before of our genre, because that gives a perspective that sometimes you have to stop and think like, why are we doing this? Because they have like no clue why there's like so many UIs, for example. So you can talk to them and realize that, hey, maybe we can try and shrink down the amount of UIs we have to make it a better experience. Instead of just blindly being like, oh, all of these games have a ton of menus that you have to go through. Let's just do that as well. And because you are alone, and I don't just mean you right now sitting at your computer at like 2 a.m. just looking at this screen, I still love you. Being alone isn't just a creative limitation, it's also a motivational limitation. Because why are we doing all of this? You go into these very deep like moments of almost desperation where you're truly questioning your life choices almost, because you're barely getting any feedback. You're just doing the same thing day in and out, starting Unity, writing some code, going to sleep, and then repeating it all. You have no like breaks, you have no interaction usually, or if you do, it's much more limited because you don't have like team members who are in this with you together. It's a lot harder to stay motivated. It's a lot harder to see like 2 years into development why you started again 2 years ago. What was that vision you had again? You can't just go and talk to someone, talk about, oh yeah, we had this amazing vision, let's keep working on it. No, everything has to come from inside of you, which is really hard. There are going to be days where you truly hate your game and you don't want to work. And if you then skip working on your game those days, if you lose that momentum, you're gonna burn out. You're gonna let go of the game. You're gonna let go of that idea and you're not going to finish it. Being with someone else, having anyone else in your team who can talk you through, who can give you those motivational pep talks, is going to do wonders for both your motivation and also just your mental health in general, because these things are draining. All of the feedback you get as well, you need someone else to be there with you almost. Because let's say you just spent 7 years and you finished your game, and then the reviews come in and they suck. They truly just are like, this is dumb, I don't like this game at all. How could you have worked on this for 7 years? That's basically what we got for a bit as well when we released our game. We got a lot of negative hate. And if you're the only person who worked on the game, well, you have to suddenly deal with all of that like load. I'll be honest with you, gamers can be really mean. I grew up playing Call of Duty. I know how mean gamers can be, and it hasn't improved since then. You have to constantly deal with waking up and getting like 5 emails every day and like Steam reviews and discussions that are like, you know, this game isn't good. How could you have ever thought this was a good idea? You should just like, I don't know, end it all. It's really hard if you don't have other people that, you know, you can like still say like, at least we released the game, at least we learned something new. If you were just sitting there all alone on yourself, it's horrible. And I don't want you to go through that. So please, if you can, try and find someone for your next game that you can work together with. And if you can't, be ready for it. Be ready to have more struggles along the way. Be ready to have days where you really don't want to work and you can't talk to anyone else, but you still have to force yourself to keep working. You still have to open that editor every day and make progress. You still have to go out and market your game, talk to people about it, because otherwise all of the work you've been doing the past 5 years, if you've been developing for so long, has been for not really anything. Okay, I don't want to be so dramatic, but yeah, try to be with someone else when you make a game. If you can't, as I said, keep your scope down, just get to know more about game development in general, get used to those hate comments, all of those things, before you like go into like a big project. Make some smaller games here and there and get some feedback that way, go through the development process. Anyways, that was all I really had to say. If you're new here, we're a game development studio. We made our own game and we talk about the things we've learned along the way. We talk about general game dev design things and stuff like that when we go to gaming events such as Gamescom and such. We vlog it as well. So if that's something that you are interested in, go down below, leave us a like, maybe subscribe as well. And let us know, did we miss anything else? Are you a solo developer? What's the thing you struggle the most with? I love to interact with you guys and you always have very insightful comments, which I really appreciate. That's all I really had to say. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!